Millions of frontline workers keep our economy running and are provided with the latest technology to do their jobs. But digital adoption, especially by frontline workers, is really hard.
This is Frontline Innovators. We explore how to overcome challenges and achieve success when we empower our essential workers.
I'm Justin Lake.
And I'm Gene Signorini. Together, we speak with experts who are leading the way and driving digital transformation to the front line.
This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, on a mission to help frontline workers learn and use the technology needed to succeed in their jobs.
Welcome to the Frontline Innovators podcast. I'm your host, Gene Signorini, and today we'll be diving into part 2 of our conversation with Chris Bond from Bluewater. If you missed part 1, be sure to check it out. Chris shared some great insights on why frontline workers have been underserved by corporate learning and development initiatives, and how we can overcome some of the obstacles to delivering meaningful training and learning programs to our critical employees on the front line. Let's jump back in with Chris now. So Chris, this has been a great conversation. I want to give you a little bit of opportunity to talk a little bit about, Bluewater and kind of why you created it, how you got into it, what you guys do. Obviously, I think through the stories you've been telling, folks can get a sense of how you're helping and trying to counsel your customers, right, and help them transform. But I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about Bluewater. Kind of what was the impetus for starting it?
Well, we are now in our 20th year of existence. So, which is I can't believe. I talk to my wife about it all the time. It's like, I can't believe you trusted me 20 years ago to start this. But thank you for doing that, because we're still going, which is really, really cool that we're here 20 years. But the idea was initially, I had been in the training and technology field for a while, and this idea of learning management systems was coming up back in the early 2000s. And I could see people really struggling with, how do I go find the right technology? How do I implement that technology? How do I operate that technology? And so I started Bluewater for the main purpose of helping organizations find technology to meet the needs of their business. And it was all about, what are your business drivers and goals? What are you trying to achieve from a training objective? And then we can go look at technology. We can help you select the right technology. And we had great success with that. But as we began to do that and began to grow, we found more and more people were looking for us to provide deeper strategy and process beyond just selecting technology. And so there's an entire strategy component to our business that exists around looking at learning and learning ecosystems and the processes and optimization of the use of technology, change management, governance, a lot of those elements in strategy that really help set up for success or begin that transformation that we've been talking about. But then as we were helping people select, all of a sudden they said, hey, can you help us implement this technology? Which was pretty cool. So now we got into the business of implementing technology and began to work with a number of strategic partners and began to do a lot of implementation work. And then as we were implementing technology, people came along and said, hey, can you stick around and help me run this technology? Can you help me operate this? Can you help support me from a client side in what we're doing? Love my vendor, but help support me on the client side. And so we began to do that as well. And now the support side of our business is actually the biggest thing we do. We do a lot of custom content creation, and that includes program development, curricula development, and individual course development for a lot of organizations. We've got a managed LMS program. We're actually running learning technology as an outsourced service for people. We've got a program we call Bluewater Assurance, where we sit alongside you as the customer. You're running it, but we're a guide, and we can jump in and help at any time. Again, client side. We do have individual products that we have around learning journey maps, and which are great for being able to help organize career development, compliance dashboarding, those elements on the support side as well. Bluewater, we're all about relationships first It's not a transactional business. We love long-term clients. We focus on impact. How do you really measure and gauge impact? It's not about the tools or the
Yep.
technology. It's about really understanding how are we making a difference in the business and how do we value that. And everything that we do is very, very flexible. So for us, our mission is for us to go hire some great people that we can transform their lives by training them to be able to serve our customers. And in serving our customers, we help our customers serve their people as well. It's a great place for us to be. And if we can do that, they're all the right way, then we're 100% confident that we can change the way that everyone leverages learning and talent technology to advance business goals. Because at the end of the day, we want to take care of the people. We want to balance the needs of the organization with the desires of the employee, but we've got to go achieve some business goals in order to be able to help make sure that all of that is going to happen. So in a nutshell, our business is really around learning and talent technology. It's around strategy, implementation, and long-term operationalized support and custom content development that helps individuals change the way they're doing things. Just modify just a little bit, and you'll be amazed at how much impact you can have. So we've got a lot of long-term great clients that we love working with, and we're always very thankful that we've been blessed to have them as a part of our Bluewater family.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously you're in a great spot today, right? Especially with this the convergence of technology in the learning space. But I found it's really interesting, right? Because you kind of mentioned something which is, I'm paraphrasing kind of what you said, but listen, it's not about the technology. The technology is a means to the end, right?
Yeah.
And I've been in the technology space for a very long time and helping companies with strategy, but it's not about the technology. It's not technology for technology's sake. And so I'd love to dig in on the technology side a little bit. And the interesting thing is we can talk about it from a learning and development standpoint, right? Learning and development leaders and professionals are sitting at the intersection of their domain with technology, right? Technology is continuing to impact them. At the same time, when we talk about frontline workers, the same thing is happening, right? Their jobs, right, are sitting at the intersection of technology. Most of them today can't do their jobs without technology. So I'd like to dive into the two of those things. So, you talked about at the beginning, right, which is sometimes there's the delivery, there's the people, process, and technology when it comes to serving the underserved frontline workers. Are there trends that you see from being in kind of the front seat at evaluating, looking at kind of emerging learning technologies? Are there things that you see on the horizon that are changing some of that dynamic, particularly when it comes to serving the needs of the frontline workforce?
First thing, yeah. So the answer is yes. First thing is we're starting to see more of the C-suite ask critical questions that are leading others to say, you know what, we've got to go focus on frontline employees.
Yep.
And do more and more to help them and to create less frustration. Because the worst thing in the world is you're a frontline employee that's being asked to do something or answer a question that you don't have the answer to or don't have the means to be able to get the answer to. That becomes incredibly frustrating. It's one of the key things that leads to a lot of turnover. So now you've got the C-suite that's beginning to ask questions inside the organization to say, how are we going to help these people? How are we going to do a better job of providing the tools and enablement to our teams in order to be able to have a better experience, both for the employee and for the customer that they may interact with. So that's step number one. We're seeing more of that go on right now than I've seen in 30 plus years being in the training and the learning business. That's fantastic. The second is we're beginning to see more of a modularization of learning technology and delivery technology. For a long period of time, it was, okay, everybody's going to go buy a learning management system, and that's going to solve all your problems. However, there's uniqueness in delivery and management of learning that happens if you are a frontline worker. And how you deliver to the manufacturing floor is different than fast food service, which is different than hospitality. And you begin to look at some of those areas as just examples of frontline workers. You've got to be able to have some adaptation of technology. There's also a lot of rules around mobile technology. Even though mobile technology is fantastic, you have to be able to navigate some of those rules. And I think organizations are finally getting to the point of recognizing we have to not avoid that conversation or question, but we just have to deal with and address the ability to go deliver content into mobile environments, mobile devices that people provide themselves or we provide. And then I've seen as an advancement, I've seen a breakdown in some organizations willing to say, hey, you know what? We want to deliver training to you on your mobile device. We're going to give you $15 a month just to be able to cover any cost that's associated with that. That's it. Think about that on a big scale. Yeah, it'll end up being a lot of money. But for an individual that's a frontline worker for this company to come in and say, I'm going to give you a $15 a month bonus because we want to train you on your phone. And oh, by the way, the training is also going to benefit you because it's going to provide not only skills you need, but your career path within our organization as well. Wow, that's a huge positive impact that didn't cost a lot of money for one individual to be able to do that. So some of those walls or barriers are breaking down where it was don't use mobile. Now we have to use mobile.
Yeah, there's
That's what
what other
everybody
means.
does. You have to. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about this, the modularization, right, of kind of learning technology and the learning tech stack. It's very interesting because I'm curious to get your perspective on how you see companies responding to that. Are they recognizing it or not, or are they slowly coming around to it? One of the things that I know I've observed when we've talked to some of our customers, some prospects out there, is there's still a tendency in some cases to try to fit a square peg in a round hole, right? They've invested in their learning management system, they've invested in certain authoring tools, they've invested in technology, right? And they're saying, well, how can we use what we have to deliver to the frontline audience in particular, right? And then on the flip side, we have customers that are coming to us very frustrated and saying, listen, we've developed all this great content, right? Or what we think is great content. And for, either our frontline workers can't get access to it, or we think we've given them access, but they're not using it. So it seems to me that that companies are still trying to catch up with this notion, right? That maybe we're moving away from a monolithic approach, right, to learning tech to no, it's going to be a suite of tools that need to kind of work together. I mean, where do you think companies are in that process?
I think that there's still about 90% that are in the monolithic environment of
Yep.
I need to go buy from one vendor and it's going to solve all my problems, and they're going to end up finding that they still have 50% of the gaps that exist there. I think that's where we are. However, there's a shift that's beginning to go on. And one of the pieces that I look at, and Skillful is a great example of this, it's more about the learning experience being embedded in the technology than just providing technology that can do anything. You can go out and buy some of these content authoring tools that are great tools that allow you to do anything, but it doesn't really help you hone down on a specific repeatable learning experience. That's one of the bigger growth areas that I'm beginning to see, is where learning experience and learning experience design is embedded in technology that can deliver on a solution or a promise for an organization. And as we do that, it's beginning to help solve specific problems that are not solvable by just hiring more people, because you still have to find that right level of consistency and design, and again, in the experience as you begin to drive that forward. That also means you may have multiple pieces of technology in your tech stack, because what Skillful does great in one area, it's going to have a gap over in another area, but you have to fill that. So you have to look at those elements. And it doesn't remove the need in the learning world of a learning management system, because you still have to have a system of record.
Yeah.
You need to have something that's going to help you manage the holistic view of what that looks like, and how you're going to manage the overall training. But now you get into delivery experience. That's a different thing that I think that we're seeing in a variety of areas, really interesting technology. So not only in the things that Skillful does, but we see other technologies that are doing more around cohort and collaborative learning that are not happening in some of the big learning management system platforms. There's other things that are going on that are very, very innovative around learning in the flow of work, that exists in desk workers, but that may not be for the deskless environment. But the deskless environment may not be, and probably shouldn't be, for the desk workers. And so these pieces that begin to look at the delivery of learning, I think are going to have a huge impact, because it's going to make it easier for the organization to be able to implement. And at the end of the day, here's the one lesson I've learned in 30 years in learning and training space is, you better make it easy or it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean,
That
it's
isn't because we don't have a lot of people working really hard. It's just the volume that you have to put through says you got to make it easy.
yeah.
You make it easy, it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you talk about the notion of, the system of record and the LMS and that initial approach. That, hey, years ago we got to implement this LMS, and it strikes me that that solved the big problem around compliance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that that piece of it with kind of an initial layer of delivery, right? Where we didn't have any e-learning in the past, right? It provided a mechanism for that. But you talk about this learning experience, and obviously this learning experience, learner experience, employee experience, right, is kind of a buzz term that we're hearing a lot about now. That seems to be where things are moving to. I mean, it makes me think of, something what Microsoft is doing with Microsoft Viva, or what their vision around Microsoft Viva
Yep.
is to create a holistic learning experience, but that can plug in other learning technologies and
Mm-hmm.
platforms and content, right? So I think that's all a positive sign. And you talked about this, and I think that's where the switch has to still flip a little bit, is that notion of, okay, that maybe, now the complexity is, what is my right mix of technologies, right? It's no longer like, hey, I'm going to send out an RFP for a learning management system and I get to choose from one of 5 of them, right? Now it's like my options may be endless, or are going to be completely unique to me because of the difference in the makeup of my particular workforce, right? So I mean, it's probably great for you at Bluewater because it opens up, opportunities for you to help guide them. But it's also, a fairly daunting process for companies now to say, okay, we've got to kind of invent something that is unique to us, right? Our learning tech stack is going to be different than anybody else's learning tech stack.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I think that there's a lot of customers that are out there today saying, okay, well, what's the next guy doing? And what's the next person doing? And how is somebody else solving this problem? And so there's really this desire for collaboration that exists out there, to begin to see if there's a different way to do it. But you're absolutely right. The differences in your company says the tech stack is going to be different. You can't just go to one of these big 3 or 4 vendors that are providing ERP plus HR plus talent plus all those pieces and say, hey, that's going to solve my problem for me. It may solve 20% of your problem, but what are you going to do about the other 80% when you're looking at, how am I dealing with the training elements, and how am I dealing with advancement of skills, and then how do I deal with long-term development? And there's a caution there not to get too caught up in one or the other of those areas, because too much hyper focus in one area says that you're going to miss the rest. It is a complex environment, but I think if people will go focus on one specific area and say, you know what, I know this is a real business need. Let's go create a business case and let's go solve that one problem, and then move to the next one and the next one and the next one, and just piecemeal that. That will be great. The thing that scares me for organizations is that they go in and they say, I'm going to buy the one big shiny object and expect it to solve all my problems. That just really does not and cannot exist anymore. It's in the solutions to specific problems that we're seeing real growth inside individuals and inside organizations.
Yep. There's one, this kind of brings me back to one of the things that I wanted to dig in from a technology perspective, which is that other side of it, right? Which is frontline workers are increasingly being tasked to use technology, right? The way I kind of see it happening is that technology is indistinguishable in many cases from their workflows, right? Their workflows are either guided by technology, right? Or their workflows are supported by technology, whatever you want to say it, it's really they're intertwined. And so, one of the areas of learning, obviously it's a focus for us, it's skillful, but I'd love to get your perspective is it seems to be a gap, particularly from a learning and development standpoint, which is, traditionally learning and development teams haven't been that involved, some more than others, but in terms of taking responsibility for, hey, that's another skill set that we need to train people on, right? We need to train them on these tools of their job. Where do you see that? How do you have you seen a shift there? Who traditionally have you seen has owned it? Has L&D kind of taken responsibility for that, or has it been kind of a gap, if you will?
Oh, it's actually, Gene, that's an awesome question. The gap is in the fact that organizations believe that I'm going to go buy this piece of technology, and the technology vendor is going to have this phenomenal training to teach us how to use the technology in context with our business. Oh, wait a second. How do they know the context of your
Right.
business? And they're actually not in the job of training. So what we see is these organizations that will buy this technology, they'll go put it in place and teach you how to use the technology, but not in the context of the
Right.
business, or frankly, training from a lot of technology vendors is not very good. And so you're getting less than optimal training, and you don't have the organizational context. Yet the IT department that was the original one that put that in didn't really think about the holistic business impact of training. Why? Because they didn't involve the training or the learning department in that process. And the training and learning departments over here, L&D's over doing its own thing over here and not really focused on the technology until sometimes you're way down the road and you come back and say, oh my gosh, why is nobody using this the right way? And the answer is because we never taught them to use it the right way. Hospitals are probably the biggest area of this area of different ways doing different things. Trying to find a nice way to put that and state that. And I'm on a board of an organization that deals with cancer and cancer patients, and to hear some of the nurses and the practitioners that are talking that will go from same company, but they'll go from one hospital to the next hospital, and the operating procedures are completely different around the same technology because they've developed their own way of adapting because nobody trained them on the way to do it. And it's almost like now I moved from one hospital to the next. I got to ramp up, even though I'm only here to be able to support these cancer patients for a week before I go to the next. And it creates this chaos. Now, not everybody's that way. We have one hospital group that we work with that they went and implemented big technology, and they put a massive amount of effort and included L&D, they included IT, they included change management into building a very, very comprehensive program for rolling out their new mainline systems. And they did a great job. but there's a lot of organizations don't do that. If they can figure out how to work through that, that they can do a really good job. It's a long way of answering your question. To most people don't pay attention to that. They think they're going to get training from the vendor of the technology and it's going to solve the problem. And they don't find out until too late that there's a gap.
Yeah, it's really interesting. A couple of things you said there, right? So that first part, right, which is, it's kind of like the crisscross pointing figures, right? Fingers, right? Well, we thought the technology vendor is going to take care of that, or no, we thought our IT team, right, is doing is going to take care of it. Whereas, and it's hard to be critical of either the software vendor or the IT team because they're not trainers, right? They're not learning professionals, right? It's not they made and it may be their best efforts, right, to do it, but it's not necessarily effective because it's not in their domain, if you will, right? And I think that's at least what I've seen. The other thing that's really interesting, Chris, that you hit on was this notion of the training on the technology is not just really training. How you train on the technology ultimately can impact your business process, right? It goes back to that concept I talked about where the technology and the business process or the workflows are intertwined. So if you're training differently on the technology, effectively what you're doing is introducing different business processes or different workflows, right? And you're going to have this massive inconsistency in your organization on how you deliver in your operations.
Yeah, the number one thing that you're doing is introducing risk.
Yes.
You introduce risk into your business.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to get to before we wrap here today is, and I think this is going to tie things together, going back to kind of the beginning. I mean, you gave some great examples of measuring the long-term impact, right? Is how do we think about the investments we make in training and learning and development, right, from a longer term impact, or really how do we tie it back to the business impacts of it? I know that's an area that you focus on pretty significantly, and I'd love to dive into that because that also seems to be maybe an area of immaturity for a lot of companies, or an area of it's just a challenge. It's right that ability is like yes, I think theoretically we understand, right, that if we invest in learning, we're going to get some positive outcome, but actually putting that together and measuring it seems to be a challenge. So how do you help companies kind of overcome that particular hurdle?
Yeah, that is one of the biggest challenges. Most L&D and HR professionals are not finance professionals.
Right.
And the finance department expects the L&D and HR professionals to understand everything that they need to about the finance side. And L&D's great at what they do. HR is great at what they do. Finance is great at what they do. So how do you begin to merge those things together in order to be able to look at short-term and long-term impact? So yes, there's short-term impact that exists in all the training activities that we're doing. But if you look at that isolated and say, that's my measure for valuation of why I did some training exercise or long-term development ability around skills or leadership, whatever it might be, then you're going to be missing a lot of the impact. And one of the big quandaries that organizations get into is, well, is this a hard dollar impact or is this a soft dollar impact? And we're beginning to see more and more CFOs and finance leaders in organizations begin to focus on a couple of things that are great measurements that can help, in many, many cases, justify and validate your investment in a new learning program, new technology, or a big process change in how you're delivering. The number one is time to competency. Time to competency is a huge deal in measuring, and it's going to be a little bit different because I've got time to competency for a salesperson versus somebody on a frontline manufacturing versus a worker in a fast food environment. So that time to competency is critical And there are factors and measurements that exist out there today that says if I can get a salesperson reduce their time to competency by 30 days, then there is a net hard dollar impact on my business. If I can reduce time to competency for somebody on the manufacturing line, then now I've got more workers to create more productivity and more product. There is a hard dollar impact on my ability to be able to go do that. That's a big one, is time to competency and really beginning to look at that. The second is turnover and replacement cost. So when we look at turnover and replacement cost, if I've got dissatisfied workers, if I have workers that don't know how to do their job, get frustrated and quit, and by the way, that's one of the number one areas around frontline workers that we see that are deskless workers. They leave companies because they're frustrated that they don't really know all their job. And many times they're willing to go leave before they get found out that they don't know their job. Well, if you're really developing them and taking care of them in the right way, then there is a model that can show a reduction in turnover. And just think, every time somebody walks out that door, that's going to cost me $5,000 going out, and a new person is $5,000 going in. So your net impact is $10,000 every time somebody goes out or in. Go multiply that times turnover rate, and your ability to go reduce it by even 1% or 5% or 10%, and you begin to get some really, really significant numbers around that. And the final piece, this is a little bit more complicated, but enabling some future business activity that needs to go on. So I was having a conversation with a CEO as an example, and he said, look, here's my big deal. We're changing our entire business model. We're going to centralize around expertise in a particular area. But I know I'm not going to get people to move to this new location. So I now have to go hire people. I got to train people, and I got to get them into a position to be able to really look at what we're doing as an organization. And I know that that's going to make us more efficient as a business, and it's going to focus on one of my specific goals. How do I actually use training and development in order to be able to get me there, not just to an equal place of where I was before, but how do I advance beyond that? How do I develop more skills? How do I expand the capabilities of my business through specific training and development initiatives? And I was having a conversation with an organization that they're in the process of doing that. And they really believe that new way of working and changing a business process that allows for a future capability is solely dependent on the ability to go train and develop new individuals in the organization. Now, that's a forward-thinking CEO that's saying, I'm not going to hire my way into it, but I got a bunch of frontline workers, and if I train them the right way, if I provide long-term development, it's going to help me transform my business. That's really a third way. And there's some great measures around the ability to go do that as well. So 3 specific areas: time to competency, always look at being able to reduce that. Just reduce overall turnover in your inbound and outbound costs. And then the third one is really about expanding the capabilities of the business to take on future vision of the C-suite.
Yeah, it's, we've had a number of organizational change management professionals on the podcast, and we actually had a series around change management. And obviously the topic of training, comes up as it's a big topic, obviously, that we've covered a lot of in the change management series, but it also seems to be one that, sometimes gets overlooked in the change management process. Mm-hmm. What you're talking about, which is really powerful to think about, is building up training and learning and development competencies can actually be an agent for change, right? Can actually accelerate change, and it can actually help you transform the business. And it's flipping it around a little bit, right? Which is saying we have to train, we need training to support that. No. It's like, if we develop, a great training competency, it actually gives us greater flexibility to change, right? It allows us to be more dynamic in how we do things, which is a really great way to think about it.
I love how you said that. I may have to borrow those words next time
it's fine. You can just clip it right from the record. You just steal it right from the recording, Chris. It's fine.
That was great.
So before we wrap it up, Chris, obviously you're a very passionate guy about everything when it comes to kind of the learning and development sphere, and I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with the audience. One thing I want to ask is, what do you love most about your job, about what you do?
Oh, wow. 30 plus years of doing this, 20 years of Bluewater. The thing that I love the most is hiring employees to come into Bluewater that have no idea what the capability of training and development and talent management can be inside an organization. So they have no background, no skills whatsoever. And to put them through a development program and watch them grow and become experts in this industry and find that same passion that I have that says, you know what, if we can just develop one more person with an incredible set of skills that transforms their life, then we're going to make a difference in the entire world. And 30 years ago, that wouldn't have been what I thought. I remember school days of being, when can I get outside and go play? When can I get out and do what I want to do? Now I get to do what I want to do every day, and my wife has to drag me away so I can do the other things. This is just a great place to be able to see change and transformation and impact in people, because we're willing to spend time to be able to develop and focus on what the transformation of their lives looks like inside a business. I get to do that every day. That's absolutely worth waking up and continuing to do the job all the time. So that's what I love the most.
That's awesome. Love to hear, Chris. And again, really appreciate you taking the time to join the program. Really love this conversation and appreciate all the insights you shared with our guests, with our listeners. Where can folks get in touch with you if they want to learn more about Bluewater? Bluewaterlearning.com, right?
Bluewaterlearning.com. You can also find me regularly over on LinkedIn and look for me there. But go to bluewaterlearning.com. You can go on to our leadership page, find me, email me. Love to talk to anybody, any period of time. Not to try to sell you something, but just try to make a difference in what you're doing with learning and talent technology. I love those conversations.
Yep. And we highly encourage folks to reach out to Chris. Obviously, he knows what he's talking about, and Bluewater knows what they're doing. If you want to find him even more easily, go to the Frontline Innovators LinkedIn page, where this video is going to be posted as well. And we'll provide a link direct to Chris also. So again, let's wrap it up here. I hope you who have been listening have found this conversation as enjoyable and informative as I have. I'd like to thank our guest again, Chris Bond, and thank you, our listeners, for continued engagement with the podcast. With that in mind, we welcome your ideas for future themes or topics we can discuss on the show. So please feel free to leave a comment on the Frontline Innovators LinkedIn page with any thoughts you have. And as a friendly reminder, this podcast is sponsored by Skillful, the only end-to-end systems training platform optimized for frontline operations. You can learn more about how you can solve your frontline system training challenges by visiting skillful.com. That's SKYLLFUL.com. Thank you again, and I look forward to joining you on our next episode.